So on a previous video, I got a comment that was ripe for internet argument. Basically, of all the bikes I've owned, which one do I think is the best? Which made me think, which one is the best? So let's get one thing out of the way right off the bat. First off, I loved all these bikes, and I never had a single major mechanical problem with any of them. Second, they're all very different motorcycles, and they're all marketed towards different segments. Let's start with the BMW R1200GS. According to BMW, this is the bike you're going to take around the world with Charlie Boorman and Ewan McGregor. With the FJR, it's really marketed as a sport touring bike. It's something you're going to be able to throw 4 days worth of gear on and go throw around the corners a little bit. When I bought mine, the sales guy was quick to point out how fast it was. And the Goldwing's all about how you're going to spend your retirement riding around the country. Okay, probably not fair. They're definitely marketing towards a younger crowd now, so let's go with this one. But yeah, the Goldwing, it's all about riding a lot and doing it in style. But all joking aside, it really depends on what you care about. There's really no way to answer this question because it's all about personal preference. And the question had caveats. I couldn't consider price tag or maintenance costs in my decision. Well, I'm just going to ignore these because quite frankly, those are two things that really matter to me. So let's start out with things that they're all universally bad at. These are all things that I hated across these bikes. First one, the seat. Now, there's really two categories here. One, the BMW and Yamaha and Honda in the other. BMW and Yamaha are terrible seats for the stock seat. There is no way you can possibly sit in that thing for longer than a few hours. The Goldwing is passable, but I'm still getting a Russell Daylong put on it. Next up is handlebar position. Now, I'm not sure if I've got really short arms or if they designed these bikes for orangutans, but every single one of these, the handlebars are way too far forward for me. Next gripe, lack of accessory power options. Now, I don't know if each one of the designers of these bikes felt that they were practically perfect in every way and no one would ever need to add anything to them, but it would be nice to be able to add some accessories and have a place to plug them in that didn't involve having to add a complete separate auxiliary electrical system. Now, the Honda gets a little bit of a pass here because they do have one terminal on the fuse box, but it's only one. Last one is getting the fuel tank completely full of fuel. Now, the BMW was by far the worst on this, but the other two get mentioned in here as well. I'm not sure what you have to do short of just nursing in the last gallon and a half of fuel, but it would really be nice to be able to put the amount of fuel in the tank that the manufacturer says that you can. So let's look at each individual bike. Let's start with the BMW R1200GS. So the first thing that I didn't like, and is actually the reason why I will never buy another BMW motorcycle, is the price of parts and accessories. I mean, laughably expensive. I would expect that they're expensive, but it was just out of control. Now, there's also not a lot of wind protection on this bike. The stock windshield is very small. I put an aftermarket windshield on it, but still 70 to 80 miles an hour, not a whole lot of fun. The lack of cruise control ended up being the reason I sold this bike. It ended up coming on a future year, but mine didn't have it, and using a throttle lock just didn't cut it. Basically, every hill I went up, I would slow down, and every hill I went down, I would speed up. So this ended up being really the reason I sold the bike, but yeah, I really didn't like that. Again, something else that came on a later version of the R1200GS, but not on mine, was TPMS. And I really think this should be the law on any motorcycle. This is just a fundamental piece of safety equipment that really every bike should have. Now, this is a problem that was easily remedied by just riding the bike a lot, but if I ever had to let the bike sit for any length of time, it was just a bear to start. The battery was charged up, everything was ready to go, it just would not start, and it would crank over like it was full of sludge. So I don't know what this was, but that really bugged me about that motorcycle. Now, the BMW R1200GS has very distinctive headlights. The big one for the low beams and the smaller one for the high beams offset from one another. But the problem is that low beam light is really not very good and leaves a lot to be desired, and really just kind of requires that you're going to have some kind of auxiliary light if you're going to ride at night, with any degree of safety at least. And that's not to say that there weren't lots of things I liked about this motorcycle too. First one being the exposed tubing. You could just attach anything anywhere. You want to put a camera here? Just put a RAM mount on and bolt it on. You want a GPS? Put a RAM mount on, you got a place to put it. Now you're not going to have a place to plug it in, but you'll have a place to put it. And the other thing I really liked about this bike was the luggage capacity. You could bring anything you wanted with you. Those boxes were enormous. Now I had the standard GS, but I bought the Adventure Touring boxes, and my goodness, those things were enormous. Now it's kind of a double-edged sword because as a young rallyist, yeah, I could take way more than I needed to, and I did a lot of times because I had room for it. But hey, better to have and not need than need and not have. Alright, moving over to the FJR. There was a lot of things I did like about this motorcycle, but one of the things I didn't like was having to remove a lot of plastic to access any of the electronics. This was definitely a bit of a shock after coming from the BMW that had everything exposed, and I definitely broke a lot of little tabs off the Tupperware on that bike. Now, ground reach on the bike ended up being one of the reasons why I sold this motorcycle. Now, it's not bad on the stock seat, but like I said before, the stock seat is so horrible that you really need to get an aftermarket seat put on it. And when I got the Russell Daylong seat, it just made it so I was on my tiptoes the whole time, and I just never felt comfortable at low speed on this bike. Now, I already kind of mentioned this in the things I didn't like about all the bikes in general, but I really wanted to call it out especially on the FJR because this is something I felt was another reason why I ended up selling the bike. I always felt like I was just leaning over the tank on this bike, and I never was sitting up straight like I would want to be on a long ride. Now, adding the Healy bar risers and the Russell Daylong seat definitely helped, but it never was perfect. It never was the way it felt right to me. Now, I almost didn't put this one on here because really I wasn't unhappy with this until I rode a Goldwing and figured out that, oh yeah, there could be a lot better. Again, the stock windshield on the FJR, not great. I added a National Cycles tall windshield on it, much better, but still, after riding a Goldwing, like, it just kind of ruined it for me. Alright, I talked about this already, no TPMS. I won't harp on it anymore, but hey, I think it should have it. So no tip over protection. This is something that I really think this motorcycle should have because there's a lot of plastic on it and a lot of very expensive plastic on it. And there is nothing stock that can help you save that plastic if you have a tip over. Even a low speed, just I drop the bike in the parking lot type tip over. Now, there's definitely aftermarket accessories that are out there that help with this. I bought the Canyon cages. That was definitely worth it for when I dropped the bike in Gerlach, but it still ended up doing some damage to a mirror, so I really think they should have some better tip over protection on this bike. And speaking of mirrors, the position of the mirrors on the FJR are absolutely terrible. They give you a wonderful view of your shoulders and just a little bit of what's behind you. Now, again, there's some aftermarket accessories that can help you fix this, but still, you would think that I would like to see what's behind me rather than my shoulders. Alright, so on the good side, there is an amazing user community out there for this motorcycle. If you need to know how to do something, there's a forum out there that can show you exactly how to do it, and quite frankly, there's probably a user group in your area that has a tech day that will show you how to do it yourself. Another thing that was kind of a breath of fresh air after owning the BMW was the prices on parts and accessories. They were expensive, but they weren't laughably expensive, and that was kind of nice for a change. And finally, reliability. I never worried about this motorcycle starting ever. Every single time I hit that button, just boom. If the bike had sat for a couple months, just started right up like a dream. Alright, now on to my current motorcycle, the 2018 Honda Goldwing. If I thought plastic was bad on the FJR, I hadn't seen nothing yet compared to the Goldwing. Pretty much you have to remove every piece of plastic off the front of it to get down into anything underneath it. It's really annoying. And every piece of plastic covers up a fastener of the next piece. So yeah, great. Next up on the gripe list for the Goldwing is the stock navigation. Well, okay, so it has stock navigation, which neither of the other two bikes did, but it is absolutely unusable. It is terrible. I don't know what Honda was thinking. I think any money they put into this, they probably could have been much better served by having a licensing agreement with Garmin to put in a Garmin GPS into the thing, but it is absolutely terrible. While this one doesn't really affect me, it does affect my daughter, and the passenger grab rails on the 2018 Goldwing are really very poorly placed. They're very close in next to the seat, and they don't give a whole lot of ability to use them for leverage in any way whatsoever. Now, I ended up getting some Traction Dynamics grab bars, which move them out and give a lot more front to back ability to grab on them. And Honda did change this in the 2020 update of the Goldwing, so I guess they get points for that, but on my bike, they're terrible. All right, so let's talk about the trunk for a second. And according to Honda, you could fit 2 helmets in this trunk, which I don't believe. I can't even fit my helmet in this. And it's not that there's not enough room horizontally, it's that there's not enough room vertically. So it's just not tall enough to be able to fit a full-size adult helmet in it. Now, I really should have labeled this one lack of a wired intercom. This bike is built for being 2-up, and there is no way to actually have an intercom with the passenger other than just relying on a Sena headset. And those are just not real reliable for intercom, in my opinion. Plus, it makes it so you can't hear everything else that's going on in the bike. And the headset's pretty important on this bike because it's required to be able to use CarPlay. So I really think they should have put a wired option on this bike. And my final gripe, at least for this video, is the lack of a place to put a tank bag. Now, because I don't have the airbag version of this bike, there is a very small little glove box thing where a tank bag would normally be. But you know what? A tank bag's kind of a, I don't know, it seems like something, it's kind of a requirement on a motorcycle. I mean, where else are you going to be able to put things where you can get at them while you're riding? And there's really not anywhere to do that short of drilling some holes in the plastic. So I really would like to see them have an option to have a tank bag on this bike. All right, so let's talk about the things I do like about this bike. And the first up is wind protection. Now, the FJR was pretty good at this. The Goldwing's even better. And you'll notice the asterisk there. I'm going to explain that in just a second. But needless to say, this is the best wind protection I've ever had on a motorcycle. Next up is the riding position. It is very good on this motorcycle. The only gripe I've got about it, which is what the asterisk is actually going to be for, is it's just not perfect. I did have to add the Healy bar risers on it, but that really made it perfect. Next is the entertainment package, and that it has an entertainment package. It's really cool to be able to have satellite radio and an actual radio itself. That's something I've never had on a bike before. And CarPlay, and because I use an iOS phone, I put this under the things I like. If I had an Android phone, I might put it under the things I don't like because Android Auto is not yet supported. Supposedly that's coming out in a couple months here. But having CarPlay is really, really nice and makes up for the stock navigation being unusable because you can throw Waze up on the screen in front of you, and that is just awesome. The asterisk on this one is that you have to have the headset plugged in to be able to use CarPlay. It will not work without a Bluetooth headset connected. So if your headset dies, you also don't get CarPlay. And going back to all these things that have asterisks by them, I put the asterisk there because basically it's pretty good, but it could be just so easily be just a little bit better. Now, the steering on this bike. Now, I know a lot of people don't really like it, but I really do. Basically, what it is that the handlebars are not directly connected to the triple tree. They're kind of on a separate axis, and they're connected to the triple tree using 2 tie rods. And I think only one of them actually does anything, but it really cuts down on vibration. And ground reach on this bike is really, really good. I can flat foot it sitting on the seat at a stoplight, so I really like that. It'll probably go up a little bit when I get the Russell Daylong, but I'm not worried about this in the least. It's very, very comfortable. And finally, the tip over protection. It has it. I actually had an unfortunate incident where I was trying to put it on the center stand in the garage and my foot slipped off the center stand and the bike tipped over and it fell over and I picked it back up. And it was really easy to pick it back up. No damage whatsoever. So I was pretty thrilled with that. So which bike's best? Well, it depends on what you care about. Each one of these bikes does something better than all the other ones and something worse than all the other ones. For me, it's the Goldwing. I mean, that's why I own that bike now, is because it's the best of all the bikes I've owned. If it wasn't, I wouldn't have bought it. So for me, it's the Goldwing. For you, it's likely going to be different. Hope this has been interesting for you. And if you like this video, please subscribe below and ride safe.